Question 7. In line 21, failed is best understood to mean what? If we look at the context, we see that the speaker is talking about these elements of nature, the robin, the daffodils, the bees, and she says, "They're here though, not a creature failed, no blossom stayed away in gentle deference to me." All these elements showed up in spite of her wishes. So she's talking not about the fact that they A, sickened, B, died, C, faded, or D, were unhappy, but about the fact that none of them were missing or absent. If you read this context, you'll see that the only supportable answer here is E, was absent. Question 8. Grammatically, the word plumes in line 26 functions as what? So here you need to remember a grammatical structure and some terms associated with it. Let's look at this entire sentence starting in line 25. And you'll notice that in this poem, as in most of Emily Dickinson's work, there are no periods. You'll need to read carefully to see when an idea begins and ends to decide where a sentence begins and ends. If you read carefully, you'll see that this sentence starts in line 25. So reading from there, we have this. Each one salutes me as he goes, and I, my childish plumes, lift in bereaved acknowledgement of their unthinking drums. So we'll play with the syntax a little to put this sentence in a more everyday conversational structure. Each one salutes me as he goes, and I lift my childish plumes in bereaved acknowledgement of their unthinking drums. Once we've done that, we see that plumes are what are being lifted. The speaker says, I lift my plumes. So plumes is the word receiving the action being done by the verb lift, which means that plumes is the direct object of the verb lift, and A, the direct object of lift in line 27, is the correct response. We'll look quickly through the rest of these for a review of the terms, though. B, an appositive for I in line 26. An appositive is a noun or a phrase that renames a word right beside it, such as my brother, a linebacker for the New England Patriots. C, the subject of lift in line 27. No, plumes are not lifting anything here. I, the speaker, is doing the lifting. D, the indirect object of lift in line 27. An indirect object is not the word that receives the direct action from the verb. Instead, an indirect object is affected by the action, but doesn't directly receive the action. For example, if I said, I gave him the keys, the direct object is keys, and the indirect object is him. So plumes here isn't functioning as an indirect object, but rather as a direct object. And E, the direct object of goes in line 25. No, plumes isn't receiving the action from the verb goes. And of course, the correct answer is A, the direct object of lift in line 27. If you need a review of direct and indirect objects, you can easily find these online just by Googling direct object and indirect object. If this is confusing to you at all, spend a little time looking through examples of each until you're comfortable identifying them. The concept is very simple, but sometimes you need to spend a little quality time with grammatical terms. Question 9. The speaker perceives the coming of spring chiefly in terms of what? This question just requires careful reading. Our first choice is A, odors and tastes. A quick glance through the poem shows that there are no odors or tastes mentioned, so this answer is insupportable. B, sounds and colors. Well, we have a shout in line 6, pianos in line 7, and yellow gown in line 10, so we do have sounds and colors. We can support this answer. Let's look through the rest. C, love and youth. We get nothing about love or youth either unless it's somehow a metaphor that we haven't untangled yet. And remember, don't choose a possible analysis of a metaphor as your answer if you have a clear-cut supportable answer, such as we have in B. Save your clever analyses for the essay questions. We can't clearly support C here, so we will eliminate it. D, music and poetry. We do have pianos in line 7, which might account for music, but we have nothing that clearly indicates poetry, so we can't support this answer either. E, shapes and textures. You might think that the yellow gown that pierces indicates a texture, but even if it does, we don't have anything about shapes. So this answer should also be eliminated, and the best, most clearly supportable answer is B, sounds and colors. Question 10. Which of the following is a subject treated in the poem? This is another one of those questions where all of the answers, except one, requires you to do some speculative analysis that is not clearly supported by the poem. Only one of these answers is straightforward and clearly supportable. Let's look through them. A. Belief in the power of religion. The only inkling of religion we have here, as we saw earlier, is this reference to Calvary as the site of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Since we don't have a clear indication of what the speaker means by that line, we can't support religion as a subject that this poem treats. B. The innocence of childhood. This is hard to support. If the speaker is a child, which is quite possible, we don't get anything that clearly supports innocence of childhood. Dread and fear are not emotions that we typically ascribe to childhood innocence, so this is by no means a clearly supportable answer. C. Fear of death. The speaker does seem to fear, but her fear seems to be more of pain than of death. And she grows accustomed to the robin who causes her pain, so she doesn't even dread him as much as she did at first. Even if the Queen of Calvary line might be hinting at something to do with death, we certainly don't have anything to clearly indicate that death is a subject that the poem addresses, so we can't support this answer. D. The relationship between nature and human beings. We have no solid reason to think that the speaker is anything other than human. You might speculate that the Queen of Calvary line or the My Childish Plumes line are hinting that the speaker isn't human, but as far as we can tell, the speaker is a person. The poem certainly treats the subject of a relationship between the speaker and nature, so this is the only supportable answer so far. And that brings us to E, the power of imagination to provide comfort. And we know that this isn't true. The speaker doesn't get any comfort from her imagination here. If she is imagining things, those imaginings are inspiring fear rather than providing comfort. So this answer is really off base. And the most supportable answer that we have here is D, the relationship between nature and human beings. Question 11. The most conventional, least idiosyncratic aspect of the poem is its what? Idiosyncratic means peculiar or individual in nature, so this is asking what is the least peculiar thing about this poem. Which of the following is the most conventional aspect? A. Diction. This refers, of course, to word choice. We do have some unusual word choices here, calling birds pianos and this enigmatic phrase, the Queen of Calvary, and the rather unusual reference to unthinking drums are all examples of rather unconventional diction. So this is probably not the best choice. B. Capitalization. Clearly, Emily Dickinson doesn't bind herself here to the accepted conventions of capitalization. We can eliminate this answer pretty quickly. C. Rhymes. Mostly here, we have either no rhyme or slant rhyme. We have a few examples of true rhyming words, so and though in lines 1 and 4, see and me in lines 14 and 16, but that's about it. The rest of the rhyming, such as it is, can at best qualify as slant rhyme, which, as you probably remember, is when words sound similar but don't really rhyme. So the rhyming in this poem is not all that conventional either. D. Meter. The meter, on the other hand, is fairly consistent. I dreaded that first robin so, but he is mastered now. I'm accustomed to him grown, he hurts a little though. The poem goes back and forth pretty consistently between iambic tetrameter and trimeter. This is by far the most conventional aspect of this poem that we've seen so far. E. Tone. Remember that this refers to the attitude of the poet and or the speaker. And what we have here is a speaker whose attitude towards nature and spring is one of dread and fear, of wishing that spring wouldn't come. That is not the tone usually adopted by poets when talking about nature and spring. So we can say that the tone is not all that conventional either. And we can confidently say that the most conventional, least idiosyncratic aspect of this poem is D, meter. Question 12. The sentiments expressed in the poem are closest to those expressed in which of the following quotations from other poets? So here we have lines from other poets talking about spring and or nature, and if we compare them to this poem, we can see that A, nothing is so beautiful as spring, when weeks and wheels shoot long and lovely and lush, by Gerard Manley Hopkins, is certainly not in keeping with our poem here. Our speaker does not espouse the sentiment that nothing is so beautiful as spring, so we can eliminate this. B, April is the cruelest month, by T.S. Eliot. April is fairly early in springtime, and our speaker would probably agree with this idea. She would most likely say that the loud, shouting robins and the piercing daffodil gowns are cruel. This is an easily supported answer. C, the poetry of earth is never dead, by John Keats. Our speaker doesn't seem to think of nature as poetry, or the elements of nature as poetry, as Keats indicates here, so we can't support this choice. D, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils, by William Wordsworth. No, our speaker doesn't get pleasure from or want to dance with daffodils at all. E, fair daffodils, we weep to see you haste away so soon, by Robert Herrick. And our speaker would not weep to see the daffodils go away, so we can't support this answer either. And the best response is B, April is the cruelest month, by T.S. Eliot.